Music happening. We got a little soundtrack tonight, and
you got me dialed in on SoundCloud.
Yes, we do, and we're gonna put that link up there. And ladies and gentlemen, we are here at Make Weird Music Live. How are you tonight, everyone? Let's do some volume adjustment there. And let's see here. All systems are go. Ladies and gentlemen, how are you? My name's André Cholmondeley, and we're here on the Gear Spotlight. And tonight we've got a really special guest, none other than Mr. Jack Hotop. And wow, the introduction itself could take a half hour. But you know what? What's going to be beautiful is that you're going to get to meet this gentleman tonight, and you're gonna meet him. He's a pianist, a synthesist, a composer. He's done soundtracks, millions of sessions and tours, but he's also been the chief voicing director at Korg Instruments, Korg Music, for almost 40 years, Jack, is that right? We're closing.
Yes, of course, I was 2 years old when I started, but
that's true. Come on, Jack, you were 5. Stop it.
All right.
And,
give or take.
But we're gonna today. What's different is I've got some music happening as we jump in. What we're listening to is Jack's own music, so we're gonna talk about this as we go along as well, and we'll put some links up, some beautiful music on his SoundCloud link. So we'll have that for you in a little bit. So come on, Jack, get organized. Christian Drumbitious, Steve Zakim. I hope I'm saying that correctly, Steve. How are you? Kendall Scott, how are you? Dean Matson, good to see you all here. And as I said, I'm making myself juggle a little bit more today with the music. But I thought, let's. It's funny because I was thinking I'm going to start doing some theme music for my show here. But today was special because we can go in with a soft start with Jack. So it's a great segue. We're just listening again to his SoundCloud. I'm going to put the link in our YouTube chat right away. A lot of amazing music. There's some real chill, quiet stuff like this, Quiet Storm stuff. And there's some ripping, take your head off synthesizer stuff. And there's some ELP material and lots and lots of his beautiful original material. Some funky stuff, some ambient stuff. So I wanted to start there to just kind of say this is who we're talking about. We're talking about a musician. Besides all the pioneering synth stuff we're talking about, this is a man who makes a lot of music. So I'll put that link and then I'll shut up. I'll shut up, and we'll start talking to Jack. This is Rock and Roll Warrior. Check out top. So all right, you all can go check this out on your own. We love SoundCloud because it's controlled by the artist. And let me turn that off and let's get back to the actual. All right, so there we have it, folks. So you met a little bit of Jack Hotop as a composer there, a little bit as a player, and that's the part of this. He's obviously tuning in also from his secret location here, which I don't even know. I've known the man for years, and he's somewhere in a secret location. So how are you, Jack? Let's start out there. Tell us how you've been this year, and how's life right now?
I'm good, thanks, and thank you for inviting me on the show. It's been a tough year for so many people, in the entertainment industry and the music community. And we're finally starting to see a break and a change in that, that there are more people that are vaccinated and there are more venues that are slowly starting to open up. So I'm happy and pleased to see that we're taking positive steps to get back to the new normal, which, it's never going to be like it was. It's been an interesting challenge for all of us to go through and get through. and I'm cautiously optimistic. I say one day, let's take it one day at a time.
That's a great, okay. That's a great inspirational thought. You're right, man. One day at a time, and being cognizant that, yeah, light at the end of that tunnel. It's still going to be some work, but I love that. And as musicians, as working professionals, it is great that, you know, we can start doing things and bring people some joy. You know, have you been able to do some sessions from home, some programming, some, you know, is that kind of been about the same, that part of it?
Like so many musicians, you know, I've been focused. I have been at home more, and I've had to concentrate what I'm doing, the work that I do, and the music that I create, and the programming at home. I mean, I have a tribute band called Afterglow. We do a Genesis tribute, and you know, we haven't been able to really play anywhere, and we haven't been able to rehearse ever since you know, the advent of COVID. But you know, we are trying to book some rehearsals, and I have a lot of fun doing that, just because playing out is really good for the soul, and we all need to do that. So I'm looking forward to doing that, and of course all my programming work for Korg, and you know, that never seems to slow down. But it's a gift and a blessing, you know, to do what you love and love what you do. That's a winning lottery ticket in life.
That's a great, another, Jack's just going to drop some beautiful words of wisdom here. That's it, a winning lottery ticket. I also like the advent of COVID. If that's not a prog rock title, I don't know what is. That's a
yeah, I definitely, I envision lots of dark chords, tetrachords, diminished scales, scales, absolutely. Odd time signatures for sure.
And a big distorted whole tone solo over the top of it. The advent of COVID. You heard it here first, but don't steal it. That's Jack Hotop's tune on his next record. Christian Martirano says hello. My brother, he says, Steve Zackham is here. Wow, what a cool group of people. Sharon's here. This is cool. This is cool. So looks like Dina Perlman is here of the Alan R. Perlman Foundation. Thank you, Dina. I was just watching Dina's stream, which was really awesome, with Marie. I'm forgetting Marie's name, but Marie was really great just a half hour ago. I was watching that. So it's been a synth day. Thank you, folks, for being here, and drop your questions there in the comments. So Jack, take us back a little bit to the beginning. I want to start. I always like to find out that spark for everyone. So tell us two things. Tell us a little bit about how you started out as a musician, first time you touched an instrument, and also with synthesis. What was the first time you heard a sound in a movie or an album or something and said, that sound means something to me? Tell us about those beginning times.
And I guess the jumping off point was when I was growing up. My father, you know, was a professional guitarist. He played in, you know, dozens of Broadway shows, and he, you know, and in big band, and he also taught guitar. And in the early 50s, he did West Side Story on Broadway. So that, you know, my mother had the record. I had, you know, I used to run around the house singing it and dancing, and you know, so my earliest memories were, you know, I had, you know, that had a real big influence on me. And my dad also played in the Joe Mooney Jazz Quartet, and he had 78 records, you know, and you know, because they used to play in the city, you know, at 53rd Street, you know, Jazz Alley and stuff like that. And so, and I, of course, I've got to say, Bugs Bunny with Milt Franklin and Carl Starling had so much great classical music references. Those you know, those were early exposures that really, I think, shaped and influenced my interest and taste in music. My mother didn't really play piano, but her mother did, and her uncles all did. And my grandparents' house was nearby, and they had, you know, a big upright, and I used to take the front, you know, when I was too small to sit at it and play. I remembered, taking the front part of the piano off where, the side you're sitting at and banging on the strings, the sustain pedals. And I said, wow, that makes some really cool sound. And then, lifting my hands up high, playing low notes, going thunder, high notes, going rain. And, so that eventually that led to, my mother said, well, they should play the piano. So I took piano lessons for a year, but my parents didn't have a piano at the house. So I would go to my grandmother's house after the lesson, and try to play and remember that. But it was, my father was like, oh, please, not another musician. Let him do any other profession. It's not for the faint of heart. But my mother persisted, and, she's the one who I owe the credit for making me take piano lessons over the years. She was persistent and consistent with that, so I had two of the greatest parents that anyone could ever have.
That's great. And now you mentioned, and you obviously, you can always tell when people have really great parents, because I've known you for many years, Jack, and you're always just look people in the eye, say hello, kindness, and then people that shit's taken for granted these days, and we know in this business there's so many people that just, it's ego and throwing shade and all that, and I want people to know that this man is a friend and somebody who was raised very well, so I share his
I give my parents credit for that. Also, you and I know, oh God, hundreds, thousands, I don't know, so many talented musicians and people on the planet. And it almost goes without saying, the uber talented artists and musicians they seem to be generally the kindest, most humble and gracious people. So there may be a connection there with the arts, but I'll say they probably all had, I'll go out on a limb, they probably had great parents too.
Absolutely. No, it's always a part of the picture. So also in those early days, I'm glad you brought up Carl Stalling and the cartoons, because right along with Carl Stalling, of course, is Raymond Scott, who was doing some of the other cartoons and things.
A lot of people don't, he wrote a lot of music which was adapted for a lot of different cartoons, but also, he was one of the early electronic music pioneers as well, and I've always been a big fan of Raymond Scott, so that that's good. And you asked me earlier, a moment ago, when did you hear something, I remember it must have been the early 60s, in public school, they had the Geo organization. They showed a film called Forbidden Planet. And that was the first movie with synthesizers in it. And, I said, wow, that really, I was hearing sounds that we were all hearing sounds that none of us had heard before. And probably during the 60s, my dad got me a tape recorder or an old Wall & Sack, and I used to play around with recording things and slowing it to half speed or speeding it up to twice that speed. And, I said, hey, I want to play in bands. And finally, when I was a teenager, my parents got me a Gibson 101 organ, which I don't have anymore, but that was, my first electronic keyboard. And as soon as it became available, I got a Maestro phase shifter, with the 3 colored buttons on it. I have to blame Yes for that when the Yes album came out, and Squire and Howe were all over the phase shifter. I said, oh, I got to have that thing,
That's great. No, that's great to hear what one of the first instruments is. That was one of my questions. But yeah, Raymond Scott. And folks, obviously, if you're here or you're watching this in replay, you are a scholar of good music and synthesis and this amazing history. And when I'm doing events for synthesis at a convention or something like KnobCon, or I'm doing a tutorial, you wouldn't believe how many people have never heard of Raymond Scott. It's amazing. So I'm glad that you can see the enthusiasm that Jack has. And those of you, just as a sidebar, if you want to study synthesis and this beautiful history of instruments that is still ongoing and starts in the late 1800s, please go look up Raymond Scott. I put the link to a wonderful website his family runs on the link there, and there it is. It's incredible. There's pictures. There's stuff about his cartoons. And if it wasn't Carl Stalling in the Bugs Bunny and all those, it's probably this man. Last point about that that's very important and very relevant to us sitting here is that a young man went and started working for Raymond Scott in the 50s, I believe, and he would do soldering and he would do different design for Raymond Scott, and he would figure out how to wire up his sequencers. That young man was Robert Moog. So Bob Moog worked for this genius, Raymond Scott, when he was a teenager. So talk about fitting into amazing history. So please study Raymond Scott, because that's a big part of why we're sitting here. So Jack, jump ahead a bit, and then you went to the Boston School of Electronic Music, and you also went to Berkeley, right?
Yeah.
At that period,
I went to Berkeley to study arranging and composition, and at that time, I'd go to the Wurlitz's music store, and lo and behold, they had mini Moogs, Mellotron, and ARP Odyssey. ARP was very close to Boston. They were in Newton, just outside the city. And Berkeley had courses in electronic music with Mike Rendish, but you needed 2 years of prerequisite courses before you were eligible, because it was a very small class. And luckily I met a band who had access to a lot of synthesizers, an Odyssey at 2600, EMS Synthy sequencer, and they paid, and they hooked me up. I was able to study with Jim Mitchmeiser and Roger Powell at Boston School of Electronic Music, which is kind of where I got my ABCs of synthesis. They also had the, an EMS, Putney or Matrix, with the matrix pens and all that. And I was fascinated by it. And, I thought Attack was the thing that would give you all the explosions, when Rick Wakeman was, doing, Fragile and all that other stuff. And I said, oh, Attack does something else. But I was very intrigued by that, back in the early 70s.
That's great. So you studied with Roger Powell.
Yeah, he was a brilliant synthesist, and also he had tremendous vocabulary musically. It was very eclectic, with classical, jazz, and rock, and he was, I think, I have to say, he was a great educator, the way he spoke and the way he taught.
That's great. No, that fits a piece of a puzzle together for me, because I did I do some consulting for the Moog Foundation, and I did one time archive a ton of pictures, and they were all this one segment of them was Roger Powell and Bob Moog driving around in upstate New York and Ohio and everything, going to music stores, going to colleges, just driving in a car with a couple of synthesizers in the trunk. And there's pictures at the gas station. They're stopping for coffee. So I hope those get out to the world. But that really fits in, because Roger is doing lectures and things. Wow, I was today years old when I found that, the Powell connection. That's blowing my mind. Okay, so that's a solid synthesis. That answers a lot of questions, because to be able to work with all those different types of synths at once is incredible. Okay, so then tell us a little bit about, for the audience's sake, again, Jack is the voicing director at Korg, what that means, a lot of you know what that means. For some of you that might not know, means and he can flesh this out, so excuse me if I screw this up, but that means Jack is part of the design of the sounds and the technology that's happening to give you, the synthesizer user, all these amazing tools. So you got to know a lot about the history of synthesis, and we just found out where it's coming from, besides his ears. Now, Jack, take us to the beginning of your time with Korg, because I know that you said the first synth you worked on was the Poly 800, right?
I had written, yes, I did a few presets in the Poly 800, and Japan was happy with that. I actually, the path that led me to Korg, I had bought a Korg Poly 6, and I wanted to hot rod it and modify it. I called the company. I said, "Hey, I'd like to add more preset locations, ring mod, an envelope mod, and a noise generator, and ornament, all these things." And I became engrossed in this long conversation with Paul Torino, one of the engineers who was working there. He invited me out, and I brought my Poly 6, which I had totally reprogrammed. I bought it, and then I didn't sleep for 36 hours reprogramming all the sounds. They said, "Oh, that's great." And that was the beginning of a beautiful relationship. But after the Poly 800, I went on to do the DW 6000 and 8000, and a ton of products from that point on, up through the Nautilus, which is, the most current instrument I've been working on. So, each, officially I'm, my title is senior voicing manager. So I do a lot of sound design, which I love doing. And that's, because it's directly related to my background, and having, owned, a Hammond, a Mellotron, clavinet, string ensembles, a Lawrence piano, biphase, the Roland Space Echoes, all those things. And I always loved ARP and Moog. And I was, I couldn't make up my mind what I wanted to get first. So I went for an EML 101.
Ooh.
And then, at one point they started offering modules. So I, had them hand wire a second module, and I added a 5-octave keyboard, and I still have the first Poly box that was I think Larry Fast passed on it, and I said, "I'll take it." And so, that, of course, I've got a mini Moog, and, Omnis, all that stuff was a great learning experience. And so that kind of was a natural path that led to programming, having that equipment, playing in bands, and then learning to imitate the sounds and things that were on records. And of course, Switched on Bach was, a big influence, but Tomita really was a sledgehammer over the head. Snowflakes Are Dancing, Pictures, The Firebird, The Planets, Bermuda Triangle, all, Tomita, I was just going, you can't do that with a synthesizer, really, that totally blew my mind back in the day. And of course, Keith Emerson, Eddie Jobson,
Sure. Well, this truly is like a nerd's dream, this interview so far, because you're hitting so many amazing points and so much that people can go back and learn from. Wow. Let me say, first of all, folks, and some of you synthesists might not know EML. What's a great company, and any of you Zappa fans, that's Tommy Mars was a big EML guy. So hopefully, Jack, you break that out of storage and we can hear you do something with that in the future, because what a unique sounding synth, right? So you said you had some modules from EML?
Yeah, I built a second panel that had 4-stage envelopes, lag processor, 4-stage envelopes instead of 3, and stereo reverb, and a free running LFO. Early on, I modified the 101s to add pulse width modulation, but eventually the second panel had oscillators where I had variable width modulation for for sawtooths, and which were variable through square, and so you could really do a lot of cool waveform manipulation, and also stacking the oscillators. And I put on and off switches for the filter inputs like a mini Moog, so that you could turn oscillators on and off quickly, in live before, in the old days, there were no presets. It was just how fast can you turn the knobs and play with your other hand.
That's key. And again, that obviously a huge part of the programming acumen is having to have that. I want to also say, I just found out today that you worked on the Poly 800 because the list is so long, and that's a special synth to me because it was my first synth. I still have, it's not the same one, but I have one across the room, and I also have the EX 800, which was the
module. Wow.
Desktop. What's cool about this, folks, and you find these really cheap. This was one of the last analog synths that Korg did until they started doing them again. But it was that and the Poly 61. Did you work on the Poly 61?
No, the Poly 61 was in development, and it came out, just when I joined Korg in 1983. So it was too late for me to work on the Poly 61, so I didn't.
Okay, so you were right at that cusp, because talk to us a little bit about the DW series, the 6000, the 8000. And I remember being in a band right then, and my keyboard player, Ben Davis, he came in with one of these. Our heads exploded. What is going on? Because before that, it was, monophonic stuff. I hadn't seen a Prophet in real life. So chords and all these sounds.
In the early 80s, Yamaha made a real big splash with the DX7, and it had a digital sound. So the engineers at Korg wanted to produce, digital oscillators, which were not your typical sine, triangle, square, sawtooth. They wanted to produce complex waveforms and put them through filters, resonance, envelope generators, and create a simpler system to program, but something that had richer textures. And they added more effects to the DW8000 and two more voices, being the 6000 was 6 voice and the DW8000 was 8 voice. And so I really enjoyed, I created the presets for those two keyboards, and that was when I really, started doing my early trips to Japan, which I absolutely love. I miss Japan. I haven't been there in a long time.
You're speaking my language, bro. Love that place. Been there 8 times. Can't wait to go back. My heart goes out. They're having a rough time, which is kind of surprising. So love to Japan, and love to all the people that are struggling with this. It's really, man. So was that your first time working with sampling waveforms, or had you fooled around with DX7s or other things by then?
I did have a DX7, and I was familiar with that. But it was the end. I didn't select the waveforms for the DW 6000 and 8000. The engineers in Japan had done that. After the Poly 800 Mark II and that, Korg, came out with the DS-S1, which was a great sampler, and it also allowed you to use the value slider to create waveforms, and also do additive synthesis, where you could, you had up to, I think, 128 different partials to create digital waveforms. And of course, you could also sample. So that's when, that was a really exciting project to do. And I, initially did the 4 discs that came with it, but then there was the library that ensued after that. And I had also, at that point, I said I need some developers to help make sounds, because it's very time consuming. So I worked with a lot of developers who contributed to that library, which of course then that, kind of led to the M1.
Exactly. Yeah. That's, you're writing my questions for me, which I love. As a sidebar, folks, we could do a series where we have Jack on here with an hour about every one of these synths. That's what's amazing. And if we just went through the hits that these keyboards are on, we're going to go right now to the next era there, the 1988, the M1, all the radio hits you can imagine, whether, pop music, progressive rock, these synths are starting to be on hip hop tracks, country, jazz, you name it. M1 just completely flattened the market. Unfortunately, we won't have time to do each synthesizer, but let's jump ahead to the big ones. Again, tell us a little bit about the M1, because suddenly there's a lot more memory, the computers are moving along at that time. Give us some memories of when the M1...
The M1 was great because Korg had developed a chip that would play back PCM, but also the chip was powerful enough to do digital multi-effects, which were very important, and not just chorus and reverb, but delays, rotary speaker, distortion, flanging and phasing. And also, Korg had the idea and concept to develop a music workstation with programs, combis, and a sequencer mode, which was battery backed. And to, Japan's credit, Chairman Kato and Seiki had said, what we really need is one voicing for the world and not a different set of sounds for each country. So I was able to bring Jim Besher, Robbie Kilgore, Peter Schwartz, and Ben Dowling to Japan to contribute to that. And also Michele Paciulli from Italy was part of the first, we used to call ourselves the MPBs, the MIDI Patch Boys, which is we still refer to ourselves that way, or sometimes we call ourselves PCM Pirates, but it was a great collaboration. And there, we were able to roll up our sleeves and work with the engineers on algorithms, on the speeds of the LFO, getting good values at low, getting, good rates at low and high values, and refining the feature spec. And so that was a real exciting time, and it was a great collaboration, much like, being in a great band. All the players were, just unbelievably talented then and now,
Wow. Good rates at high values. That sounds like a Crazy Eddie commercial.
Yeah.
Those of you in the New York area, and we're going to come back to the New York area in a second. Hey, I got a question that came in from Tom Woolley, our dear friend Tom Woolley. And you might know Tom. He was the manager at Sam Ash Paramus for a quarter century, amazing keyboard player. And he asks, tell us a little bit about the M1 pole sample, the M1.
Oh yeah, there was a studio in Japan called Sound Atelier, and they had a pole like right outside the control room, and I think, somebody struck it with a key and said, oh, that we got to use that sound. And so that's, that's where pole came from. And Peter Schwartz did a really cool version using that, where he had these really soft, envelopes on it. And I think he called that sound Zephyr, which was using the pole sample. And that was, at the tail end of getting the ROM together and trying to vote things in, vote things out, we still needed a couple of sounds. We went to that studio and we wanted a slap bass. We didn't have a good slap bass, and we got a bass, but the strings were dead. And Robbie Kilgore said, that's no problem, I got a pick. And he played it, and he started playing the theme from Gunsmoke, and that became the pick bass in the M1. So right. We didn't have a pan flute, and we were in Yokohama one day, having lunch at a Chinese restaurant, and we went out the door, and I go, oh, there's a pan flute. So I bought a pan flute, and that became the pan flute in the M1. And Athen Bilius had this ginormous sake bottle that, of course, he was sharing with other people. And it was, a lower tone than a regular sized bottle. And that became the bottle sample that's in the M1 ROM. It's every sample in there has got its own story.
Oh, man. This is so great. I want to do an hour just on the M1 now. So this is, and folks, we're talking 1988, and I want to give a suggestion to you gearheads, especially the younger people on a budget looking around in used music stores. Things have flipped around, because when this stuff came out, you could buy a mini Moog, you could buy a profit. You can buy ARPs and all these things really dirt cheap. But now in 2021, you can buy some of these synths we're talking about. I've seen DX7s for $220. I've seen M1s for a couple $100. So these are incredible synths, and I think as Jack is talking about, they're just as cutting edge. They just went in a different direction, and it's just wonderful hearing kind of the randomness of how you guys got into
a necessity, being the mother of invention to make things happen, and also deadlines, make work at, if you have an imposed deadline, you've got to make a cool, hard decision and not overthink things too much.
Yeah.
So that was, I think that's part of the process. And earlier, you and I were talking about old gear, and there's a lot of new gear that can do some of the things the old gear does, but not quite everything. And there's a unique, character for, I think, every instrument that comes along. Look at guitar players with their ginormous guitar collections. So as keyboard players, or multi-instrumentalists, whatever we want to call ourselves, we like to be surrounded by old gear that just does a certain thing a certain way that's really, that can't be achieved with all the new powerful plugins and instruments and gear that's around and available today. Everything has its value, but I agree what you're saying about, there's some real good value in older gear. It's got to be preserved. Sometimes it might need a power switch replaced.
Right. Yeah. Segue, I was joking around there about Crazy Eddie, which again, people in the New York area would know about.
Insane!
He had a cheesy jacket on, like I do. The prices, but if you grew up around New York, you also would always hear commercials for Rat Race Choir. It's this great band, Rat Race Choir. So I want to jump a little bit because the yin yang of the wonderful Jack Hotop story is he has changed synthesis, folks, for forever. He has changed the music industry, and I love it. I love how it's just very natural to me. He's like, yeah, it's what I do. I author voices for some of the most incredible synths. But the other half is his musicianship. And this whole time he's playing, he's touring. And I want to ask him about Rat Race Choir, but I also want to tell people that you can find recordings and bootlegs, I'm sure, of Jack out with the Drifters, Gloria Gaynor, the Silver Convention, Equinox, John Entwistle, Leslie West, and from Cheap Trick, Robin Zander played in his band. So, and that's just a few of the things he's done. But talk to us a little bit, because it's a New York thing, about Rat Race Choir and how that led to playing with John Entwistle.
I was a big fan of Rat Race Choir. Before I was in the band, I remember going to see them, and they'd be playing Thick as a Brick, and they had the quad PA, and also, but they were playing, Alaska and Dead of Night from UK in 30 years, and Meeting of the Spirits of Mahavishnu, and and Gentle Giant stuff, which was, Freehand and Just the Same. And I was going, I love these guys, plus they did, Zeppelin, Tull, the Moody's, all that other great classic rock stuff. And, Rat Race had been around since the early 60s. Bob Mayo was in the band. Before I was in the band, Larry McGowan, God rest his soul, and Gordon Cotton, actually. They played keys. I started playing with Rat Race in 1981 and had a great time doing that. And I think it was in 1987, all the guys in the band came out to Chicago NAMM at McCormick, and there was a jam that night with Niels Shawn, Dweezil Zappa, John Entwistle, Leslie West. But John and Leslie said, well, I need, guys that know the stuff. And we all knew all the Who stuff and all the Mountain stuff. So we backed him up. And then John was like, whoa, well, you guys want to be my band? And we were like, yeah, twist my arm harder. And the same thing with Leslie, so we wound up, backing, being the John Entwistle Band and Leslie West Band. And Korg graciously gave me some time off to, do a little tour here in the Northeast. But after a while, they said, hey, time to make the donuts, get back to work. And so Gordon stepped in and played with them for a while. Then Alan St. John played keys, and then Chris Clark played with John, most recently. And we got to actually, Chris was gracious enough to, invite me to, play his rig. And we played together and separately with John at BB King's, which was a lot of fun. And again, that was, that all leads back to Rat Race Choir. And the same thing, Steve Longo had, he developed a really good relationship with Robin Zander. And he said, hey, we're going to do a couple of gigs, here in the Northeast and, at BB King's at the Bolton Center out in Bayville. And so I was lucky enough to do a bunch of gigs with the Robin Zander Band, which was a great, a great opportunity. And, again, because I've got my Korg work, it's not like I can go on the road, but it was just a great opportunity to play with those guys.
That's great. No, what a great reminder that you're out there in the trenches and to play with John Entwistle. And it's funny, I didn't know, I knew Rat Race did some prog rock, but I didn't know they were doing those specific things, ELP and Tull and Gentle Giant. It's funny, I want to segue to that, and just for you, I ran up and I got my coffee cup with coffee in it of my UK mug. So I thought, and folks, this is the special 4-man version of UK, of course. But let's talk about that a little bit, because you and I were talking earlier about the Eddie Jobson connection and to Entwistle, who you've played with. And I was saying, and this is for the audience, a quick little anecdote is that Eddie Jobson knew John Entwistle. Eddie was a teenager, 17, 18 years old, right before he got into Curved Air. And you got to understand that John Entwistle, in friendly competition with Pete Townsend, had an incredible synth collection. So Eddie would go over and be able to play ARP 2500s, 2600s, WASPs, EMSs, Moogs. And that explains a whole lot, because like Jack, which similarly in Boston School of Electronic Music, had a very rare, people got to understand, you couldn't just go to a record store, a music store, and they had 100 synths. And Jack, right? You corroborate that. It was very hard to do that. Talk to us a little bit about Eddie Jobson, and because we both just are such big fans of his playing, and you've played a lot of his music. Talk to us about first time hearing Eddie and seeing UK and the CS80. Just take us through some of those thoughts.
I was lucky enough to see Eddie when Alan Holsworth and Bill Bruford were playing with them. I saw him at the Academy of Music in the city and out at the Calderon in Long Island. And, we were saying earlier, I think, there's the Yamaha CS80 is just a beautiful beast. And I don't think anyone ever evoked the sounds and a performance out of it the way Eddie did. And largely, he's got an incredible background and knowledge of synthesis. And in the early mid 90s, Eddie was he had a studio in Manhattan. He was living in the city. And I got together with him, invited him out to Korg, and I sat down, I kind of played a little bit of Presto and Vivace and, Dead of Night and, a few riffs. And he was like, oh, my music kind of thing. He was really great and gracious. And when Korg had the 01W, they had a promotional CD. And Eddie created a track called Sketch for Orchestra, I think number 4 or number 5, which it was done on an 01W, but it's one of the, I think if you, search, it's certainly on the internet, but it was this incredible piece of music, and Eddie graciously agreed to do that. That CD, you know, had Keith Emerson, Rick Wakeman, Brian Auger, Chuck Leavell, Greg Phillinganes, Dave Stewart. I mean, it was a who's who, you know, Zawinul, everybody that contributed, you know, the legends all contributed tracks to that. So, you know, I've had a really great close relationship with Eddie over the years. And, you know, plus he was and is just such a major influence for me as a musician, composer, and synthesist. You know, I'm a big fan of you know, of his, you know, knowledge and prowess on synths.
That's a great great tribute, and I've heard you play a bunch of that music. You know, before we jump back to some of the for the fans out there, look at these nat notes. Oh my God, this is like he was in Zappa's band and he starts writing this kind of stuff. So that's there for the record, so someone can playing along at home. Now let's jump back to the nerdy synth history, and someone can DM me if they want to copy that. But that's important because that's part and parcel of the programming thing. The fact that you just, a handful of you guys, and I'm serious, you, Larry Fast, Roger Powell, Eddie, of course, Eric Persing, Eric Norlander, you know, and excuse me, I'm sure I'm forgetting a couple people, but there's just a couple dozen people, I'll say, who go to that next level of really understanding how to get far inside a synthesizer and come up with some shit, you know. And I think one of the things too, I always hear people say, and I've done it too, I've owned a number of Korg keyboards, and Korg's one of the only companies where you go through and the presets are pretty good. And I think, you know, we can thank you on that. So you then went on to develop the Oasis and the O1W and the Triton, right? The Trinity, the Triton, and the Triton. Tell us about the trilogy of the Triton, Trinity, T3, Triton.
Well, you know, my contributions to those products was really not developing them, you know, where I have to really credit the engineering teams, you know, at least for the Trinity and the Triton, you know, that was, you know, designed, developed in Japan, even though I did, you know, an awful lot of sounds for the Triton series and the expansion boards, and which was a lot of fun. And there was a period, you know, the M1, the T series, the Wavestation, the O1W, they didn't have resonant filters. When Korg came out with the Trinity, you know, was the return of a resonant filter, which was great, which the Triton also had, but the Triton brought back the return of sampling, which was, you know, again, another important element for, you know, a successful music workstation. So largely my, you know, contributions, you know, were just, you know, programs, combis, demos, sequences, and options, more so than the physical designs. You know, of course, I always, you know, with spec, you always contribute suggestions and stuff, but it's very much a team thing. You know, I think the guys at Korg R&D and at Korg Inc. in Japan deserve tremendous credit, and we do work as a team. You know, I don't think it's any one individual, you know, who makes that that kind of an achievement. So I think the credit should be spread around for those products. Korg R&D, you know, they were responsible for the development of the Wavestation, and then also for the Oasis, which was really a key product from which, you know, the M3 evolved, and the Kronos and the Nautilus are kind of based on the fundamental approach of using different engines, synthesizer engines, the AL1 analog modeling, the Mod 7, which is, FM or modeling, and the CX3 engine, and incorporating that with PCM playback engine, and also developing updates, and software updates. The Kronos has been around for 10 years, and which is an unbelievable successful run. And, to the credit of Korg and Korg R&D, the software updates, have added extra banks of programs. And, there's been really, really good support for the product, improving the CX3 engine, the piano, the SGX engine. And, so having that ongoing support is, I think that makes a good that's a good secret in the sauce of success.
Wow. No, what a great response. And folks, the humility of this man, the kindness, because listen to him. He wants to remind us that it's a team. It's not just him. He's working. I'm going to say, wow, that is beautiful. But the way I see it, those engineers kind of come up with the Lego pieces or the Tinker Toy pieces, if you prefer, and that's great. You have to invent, and they throw them on the floor, and who knows how to put them together. But you come along, and you're able to construct something because of what's coming out of your head. So I'm going to salute that. But you're right. It's a team. And obviously your role is to really be able to understand this. This is groundbreaking technology, folks, as it's coming along. You got to understand, when you study that history of synthesis, as we're so passionate about here at Make Weird Music, and you look at subtractive synthesis, additive synthesis, FM was around, samples are starting to come around. But what Korg was doing particularly, as Jack said, with combining it all into one stew, this is science fiction at that point. And this man heard, all the parts and pieces. I want to talk a little bit. I've got a great question here. I just got a question in from my dear friend Kendall Scott. He's in a band with me, the Project Object Zappa band. We did a tour once where we could only carry one keyboard to Europe, and the Kronos had just come out a year ago. And he said, well, I just got this thing, but let's go for it. We went to Europe and we did 3 hours of Frank Zappa music. And he had every sound in there: the pianos, the strings, the Elka string synths, the EML type sounds, the horn blasts, the Oberheim stuff, the Moog solos, the electric pianos. The Kronos is amazing, folks. And as Jack said, it's 10 years and it still sells. I want to jump back to one of the precursors, and Kendall had a great question. Around 99, Korg introduced the Oasis PCI, which is also radical because it was a card that went into both PC and Mac. But then about 5-6 years later, you're able to actually put it into the actual Oasis. Tell us what happened that enabled you to be able to put that into a keyboard, because that's a big jump.
Korg had started to develop, Korg R&D and Korg Inc. were both working on modeling technologies with the Morse boards, and there was the Z1 and the Prophecy, where they had woodwind reed models and brass models, brass models of a trumpet and string models, and also, in addition to the modeling, effects were being modeled too. The Overb, which was on the PCI card, it was a development step which was on the way to the Oasis by the integration of technologies. I think we owe it all to our childhood of playing with Tinker Toys, Gilbert Erector sets, and Lego. You've got these components, and the idea is like, okay, let's kind of put these things to, you can mix and match things and create a Tarkus, a Tarkadillo.
That's great. No, that's okay. And again, so daring, people have to realize too, we take computers for granted now, but in 1999, to kind of go, you know what, let's utilize these new computers, and add, make something that goes in the computer. So crazy idea, but that explains the jump back into hardware. I want to go, so that's a question from Kendall Scott, who's also in the amazing prog rock band Nectar these days. He's been in Nectar for a couple years. I want to jump back to some other questions, to some other comments. Let's see who's out there. Let's see. Let's go some questions. Really enthusiastic folks. Thank you for stopping by. And someone from the ASMC, is that the Composer Foundation? I'd love to see this video of Raymond Scott that someone's speaking about there. So please put the links there. And Dina Perlman is still here. That's so fantastic. Folks, again, Dina Perlman runs the Alan R. Perlman Foundation. And those of you that want to support education and maintaining archives, and her dad was Alan Perlman of ARP, that his initials are ARP. And she's another dear friend of Jack Hotop. But as her dear friend Michelle Mokusa does, they both maintain something very important. Their dads are a big reason we're sitting here. Again, Bob Moog, Alan Perlman, we thank them. And their daughters are running foundations each. So please follow some links there. Check it out. Friend Dina on Facebook, friend Michelle. And, there's so much stuff to still learn about what they did. And these are instruments, again, that our dear friend, Mr. Jack Hotop, grew up playing. So Dina, thanks for that stream of Marianne Hedonia, which we saw earlier. Okay, any other questions here? People just saying they're loving it. Okay, Steve Zackham says, and this is great, Steve, because this is one of my next questions. Perfect. We want to talk about how Jack feels about where things are right now. And I'm going to start by saying, by way of a question, Jack, what's your thoughts on this rebirth that's going on, where so many of your dear friends, Tom Oberheim and Dave Smith and Roger Lynn, all these folks, they probably scratch their head every day going, how am I having a third career? I'm selling analog synthesizers, analog drum machines. Korg, the company you've been with so long, has all these analog synthesizers. Talk to us a little bit about how you feel about what's happening now and what excites you about music technology, as Steve Zackham asks.
I think there's an ongoing evolution with products. And with that evolution, there's an integration that happens with technology. And sometimes it's, the inclusion of many elements into, something like a workstation is great and formidable, and they keep getting, like computers, they become more powerful and faster. But also looking to the past, we can look to products like that Dave Smith, the Prophet 5, the T8, all the, the great products that Dave has developed over the years, and refine them with, newer components. And, so I'm a big fan of what Dave has done, and, also collaborating with Tom Oberheim, and also what Roger Lynn, is doing there. All, you could look at it as a refinement, where it's just taking something that was really good and a really good model and just saying, what, I just want to improve it slightly with, make the body fast, a little more futuristic, make the engine purr, and behave. And, it's a refinement of existing technologies, where in the past, there's always a wish list with products. And sometimes it's like, well, we're out of time, we're out of spec, we're out of money, these decisions have to be made either for a price point or a time constraint. And so the opportunity to look back and say, well, we couldn't do that then, but we could do that now. I think we're seeing that. And certainly, Korg is also, looking to their past with, what certainly with the what they've done with their MS-20s and their mini Korg, but also, resurrecting the ARP Odyssey, and with newer, components, and the 2600 faithfully recreated and modeled, because that's old gear is great, but keeping it well maintained and working, that can become because like human bodies, old gear, time takes its toll on us. So I think what Korg and Dave Smith and Roger and Tom Oberheim have been doing is really great, that we're seeing a resurgence and a resurrection of these great instruments with, albeit some enhanced features. So I enjoy seeing that on our horizon.
That's great. No, that's really cool. Yeah, it's amazing. All of these synths, and Jack raises a great point. The duplications of the 2600, the great ARP 2600 is around, and of course Behringer is controversial, but one of the things they're doing is bringing back a lot of weird things like the Wasp and all these other strange synths that we can get now. There's this great company Erica in Latvia or Estonia that they have even a duplication of the EMS Synthy. Did you see that?
Yes.
Wow. I mean, who would have ever, So, by the way, if anyone knows how to reach the Erica people, I'd love to have them on the show. Jack, let's talk a little bit more about music again. And folks, again, we got Jack Hotop's music on his SoundCloud. Please go dig in there, listen to some stuff. There's all kinds of music there. There's kind of rock and roll stuff, funky stuff, jazz, all kinds of cool things using his great programming. And like I said, he does a take on a couple ELP classics on there, so you got to check that out. Now, one of the things, and I met Jack because everyone knows I have another career as a tech and a tour manager, so I've met Jack at many shows. He came out to see when I was with Keith Emerson, and Greg Lake, when I was with Eddie Jobson, when I've been with Yes. And so what that always tells me, and always a smile on his face, here's someone who has never and will never lose that love for music, that spark. And sometimes people lose that in the music industry. You go to NAMM, there's some people just going like, I'm hating this. And that's okay because it's tiring. But Jack is always excited about music. We're always talking about music. He's always playing music. He's got his Genesis tribute band. Tell us the name of the tribute band again so people can...
Afterglow.
Afterglow. Hopefully later this year, Afterglow will be back on stage. I've seen videos. They're amazing. But here's my question. We know that you've got that prog rock love and that fusion love, and we've talked about it. Now, do you get a chance... talk to us a little bit about some of the other music that is so important to so many of us that uses synthesis. Tell us a little bit if you've got to hang out with bands like Depeche Mode or Chemical Brothers, Prodigy, The Orb, Orbital, BT, Alphaville, all these bands that have created amazing music we still listen to. Tell us about that type of synth usage and your thoughts.
I love every name that you just mentioned, and I have not had the opportunity to hang or work with any of those artists, but I'm a big fan of Noah, Louis Cole and Genevieve, brilliant sound design, brilliant music, the musicality, just, all that I give him, high praise and really good kudos for what they've done and what they're doing, and they're really cool, dear friends. Adam Holtzman's another, certainly the stuff that he's done with Steve Wilson and all that, but over the years, Brave New World, all the stuff that Adam has done over the years, I'm a big fan of his playing and of his synthesis and sound design. He's a dear close friend, and he's always inspirational, and he's the man that never sleeps. Jordan Rudess, another,
Sure.
I'm gonna go see him. He's gonna be performing in New Jersey, doing his Bach to rock, like piano from the beginning of time into the the end of time. He's one of my closest and dearest friends. So there's with music and genres, I'm all over the place with classical, jazz, prog, electronica, R&B, hip hop. I try to have an open mind with everything. And Stravinsky once said, there's no such thing as a good style or bad style. There's just, as a musician, I hope when I'm playing the good charts and the good music. And,
Yeah.
there's good and bad with every style, so it's a question of taste and judgment. But, it was kind of like a loaded question, but he had a really cool answer. I think that was back in the days when he used to go hang out in Harlem, to hear all like the jazz players, and like Art Tatum and, and I love Stravinsky.
Oh, so great. I just stumbled across a video on YouTube of him sitting with Robert Kraft at the piano and just talking about stuff and working on Aegon or something. Blew my mind. I don't know if you've seen that, but yeah, Stravinsky at the piano.
Yeah. Also, Rob Schwimmer is another genius friend. He just posted something on Facebook today where he's playing Yesterday, but it's reharmonized like, from Mars. And, he's just, besides being an incredible pianist and composer and, he's like the best theremin player I know or have ever heard. He's,
it's, which by the way, thanks for reminding me, because I always forget to, I'm having such fun that I forget to do some of the business. We've got a little more time, but let's do a little business. We're here at Make Weird Music, and as always, I thank Anthony Garone for coming up with this crazy idea to have a Facebook channel, a website, a YouTube channel, and a couple other entities to celebrate music that colors outside the lines, and musicians and creators. So that's why we're here. And I have 2 shows on this channel: the Gear Spotlight every 2 weeks, on the fortnight, as the Brits would say. And every other Friday, I've got a show called Confronting Creativity. Thank you, Jack, because you remind me that in about 9 days, on the 21st, I've got an incredible guest, and she is, just one of the greatest thereminists of all time, but certainly one of the living.
Pamela?
No, Pamela is awesome too. There's a good handful of them. Pamela is a good friend, Pamela Kirsten, and I did some stuff with her, Moog in Frankfurt at the Music Messe actually. So trying to get her too. She's on my list because there's so few thereminists. But it's one of her sisters of the theremin, and her name is Dorit Chrysler. She's going to be here a week from this coming Friday, and she's got people know her in the USA, but she's a colossal star in other parts of the world, and especially in Germany, in Europe, where she's from. But Dorit Chrysler, folks can look her up. Chrysler spelled like the car, and she's going to be here a week from Friday. So more synthesis, more history. And by the way, it reminds me, go watch Sisters with Transistors, which is a movie about the history of women in synthesis, going back to Clara Rockmore and Delia Derbyshire's in there, and all kinds of amazing creatives. So that's coming up. And then 2 weeks from tonight, I've got an astronaut. That's right, Katie Coleman, who is also a flutist or flautist, if you prefer. And she has been into space, I think, 9 times. And she takes her flute. So some of you have seen video of her performing on satellite with Ian Anderson. She's going to be on the show talking about music, talking about being in space, talking about space junk. So we're extending the International Month of Women, and we're going to keep going down the road with it with music. And then on Friday, May 28th, my boss, Adrian Ballou, with an exclusive interview about his new record. So we got a lot of stuff coming up. And finally, Diego Tejada, I always say his name wrong. Diego Tejeda, great keyboard player from the band Haken. He's doing some amazing stuff too in a heavy metal context. So just have to do some plugs there, folks. Coming back to some of your questions, and Jack, thank you for saying something very important, that it's about having that diverse listening. And I loved it, like you said, you mentioned Stravinsky and Schwimmer, and you mentioned Lewis Cole and Knower, and that's, wow, that guy is one of my favorite, and you know, he blows my mind. He's got like 6 different projects, right? And
yeah, I mean, he's even done some stuff with, you know, Bob Minster's big band, and of course Dirty Loops. Gotta love Dirty Loops.
And the clown thing,
the clown thing, yeah. Lewis is crazy, man.
Google Lewis Cole and Knower and you know, Genevieve, amazing people. And you know, a lot of people my age and our age say, "Oh, music, there's no good music." And what are you talking about? I can't keep up these bands that are out there, whether it's Bent Knee or Tune Yards or, you know, Thundercat. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, Thundercat. Yeah, man.
Come on. And everyone in Thundercat's band, you know. So folks, we're charged up. And again, every time I talk to Jack, we talk about some new music. We talk about what we've grown up listening to, but he's always got something to say about some new shit that he's heard. So don't lose faith. Let's go back to some questions then. And I know Jack just has a little bit of time. Dina Proman is asking, well, where did that question go? Oh, I just saw, who is Jerry's favorite synth player? Jerry? I'm not sure who Jerry is.
Jerry Kowarski.
Oh, okay. Yes, it threw me off as the spelling. Gerrie. But okay, yeah. Who's Jerry? Jerry's favorite synth player.
Yeah. Wow, that's a real.
I think that's.
It's a real tough question. You know, I might go with Keith Emerson on that. You know, because Jerry just was, you know, such a big Keith Emerson fan over the years, and we both had a lot of great memories hanging out with Keith, and I'd be curious. That would be my guess. I don't know for sure, but I would put a guess that Keith might be his favorite. Oh, Wendy Carlos, you know, is also high on his list. You know, for you know, major synthesis influences, but you got to ask Jerry.
Yeah. Thinking that's who Dina meant. It's spelled a little differently, but we'll assume that unless she your mom.
Oh, my mother loves Tomita.
Tomita, okay.
Yeah, Isaiah Tomita. I mean, my grandmother used to play Clair de Lune on the piano and Reverie, Arabesque, and you know, when my mother heard Tomita doing that, she goes, I like this guy. So yeah, she's that would be my mother's favorite synthesis, I would have to say, is Tomita.
Okay. As Dina says, besides you. Sorry about that, Dina. I couldn't, you know, the spelling threw me off. I mean, we're talking about so many wonderful keyboard players. Someone mentions Bernie Worrell, and sadly, we just, of course, lost Chick Corea. We've lost George Duke, you know, a few years ago now. But all of these people that we've all grown up with, and I know Jack loves. Jack, do you have a favorite? I mean, is that possible for you? I mean, do you have a favorite keyboard player?
No, that's an impossible question. There's, yeah, I could say some, well, Herbie is special. You know, he's a genius and a dear friend, you know, and you know, he's always doing something new and innovative, and you never know what he's going to do, but he's that eternal child, always exploring, and he's got that inquisitive mind for technology and to go places, you know, and to uncharted waters. And like a cat landing on his feet, Herbie always comes up with like he injects stuff with incredible musicality. So, you know, he's pretty pretty high on the up there list, I guess. But it's too hard for me to pick one. I don't know.
Okay. No, that's a tough one. You know, some great shout outs here, and you got a shout out here from Dean Matson, who you've met. Dean is the longtime front of house engineer, and he was the monitor engineer for a while for Yes. So I introduced you to him one time, and check this out. Dean, in this past year, has become a synthesist. And you're part of that because he's been studying Korg and studying your history. And he just bought, I know you didn't work on this one particularly, but in that lineage, he bought a mini log and he's doing radio plays and sound effects and stuff. And so that's so inspiring because it shows that, you know, it's such a wonderful area to learn and to bring your knowledge of sound, as he's already, you know, he's a professional engineer, sound engineer. But I think that's remarkable because it's the key to synthesis that you're working with raw sound. So thank you for that inspiration on that too. And he says, Jack rocks. But people are bringing up Snarky Puppy and Igor. Yeah, all these.
Snarky Puppy, man. Corey Henry, you know, I mean, you know.
And he takes a solo on a Korg on one of those. You know, there's so much stuff to talk about here. I want to jump back to one of the things. I've always wondered when I look at some of these sequencers that you helped develop, because the 01W was such a big deal. Just to jump cut back to that, it was such a big deal because the sequencer in there, to have a synth with a sequencer, and you had all these standalone sequencers. Talk to me a little bit about your kind of concept of sequencing. And again, I know it's a team and the engineers are involved, but talk to us about your sequencers in your life. What's the first time? Was it a Tridex Muse? Was it a Moog 960? Because sequencers are so important in this game.
You know, that's one of the things I love about the Poly 800 step sequencer. You know, Korg had the SQ10 before that, but you know that was the thing about the Poly 800. It was self-contained. The DW8000 arpeggiator wasn't a step sequencer, but it would remember the order of the notes that you played. So in that sense, it could play back in a, you know, not in a pattern of your own choosing. As far as the sequences go, you know, Don Miro who's a great friend I keep in contact with. He did an unbelievable demo with the M1, you know, that kind of showed off sounds and musical styles. And Stephen Kay did an incredible demo for the 01W. So part of the process is just becoming aware, you know, comfortable with the features and using the gear and being able to show and explain things to people. So that led to, you know, a good exploration of the features of the internal sequences. And also, like many people, I'll go up to a keyboard, I'm inspired, or at NAMM, you know, I've got to show sounds quickly. So, you know, it's like, oh, if this is a great sound, oh, I need a great groove, I'm going to sequence something so I can play along with it. And, you know, again, a perfect example of necessity becoming the mother of invention, working. And as these products have evolved, the sequences have gotten more powerful, just as DAWs, you know, have also grown and become very powerful. So, you know, it's another, you know, in the old days, it was tape recording. Now it's, you know, then digital recording and digital audio. And so, and there's a whole integration of that now. So it's pretty good gumbo.
That segues to a question I had, which someone else asked here. I lost track of who asked it, but one of my questions was going to be exactly what you just touched on. What's your, how much do you have time to fool around with some of this great new software that's out there, these plugins, whether it's Omnisphere or Arturia or Moog's got software, Korg's got software. Do you get a chance to mess around on iPads and on computers and try some of this? What's your thought?
Not as, I don't have as much time as I would like, and therefore I don't have that much exploration time, which it's great to play around with that stuff. But at the end of the day, I have to put it down and say, what did I accomplish? And my workload kind of dictates, which is, still largely hardware based, that dictates where I'm going to spend my time and try to achieve some modicum of life balance, get on the bike once a week, or maybe more would be good.
No, that's great. And, horses for courses, as the Brits say, that you can only do so much. Well, this is so great, Jack. Thank you so much for your time. And we're gonna
thank you.
Yeah, of course, we're gonna take this in for a landing. And you mentioned Herbie before, an upcoming guest in a few weeks. We haven't scheduled a date yet, but the great Patrick Gleason is gonna come on the show. And
sure, yeah.
Of course,
different for recording studios, and he's got a long history that working with Herbie, and he's I was inspired and influenced from Patrick years ago. He's I think he's very, very capable and very talented.
Another great programmer, folks. So look him up and get ready for that one. He worked with Don Preston on the soundtrack to Apocalypse Now, and Patrick did the helicopter sound. And he engineered and produced the first Devo record. It's credited to Eno, but he did the programming on that. But we're going to have him as well. We're going to continue the synthesis thing. A couple more messages. Steve Zackham says, tell Jack I'll give him back the sheet music to pictures at an exhibition.
Mussorgsky rocks, man.
Started at Berkeley, so it was a couple years ago. Jacob Collier, yeah, there's so much great.
Oh, Jacob Collier, yeah, man.
Oh, so much great music. Jack, have you been to visit EMIAP near Philly? Have you checked that out yet?
No, that's on my to-do list.
Okay, so because EMIAP, folks, is the Electronic Music Education and Preservation Project. Wow, it says it all. And check out the website. We don't have time to really show much of it, but check out emiap.org. They are collecting archival instruments, and they do workshops. I'm gonna hope that I'm on their unofficial advisory board, and we talk all the time. But I think this man, Jack Hotop, once we're able to get out and do things, that would be a great fit, Jack. If you can jump on the train and go down to Philly, that would work, right?
Yes, it would.
Okay, let's do that. So Jim. Okay, this is as tough as my name. Jim Mitchmerhusen from the Boston Music School.
Jim Mitchmerhusen, yes.
Sorry, he says hello or sends a hello, and
I'm eternally grateful.
There you go. And Dina says he's been working on projects with the ARP Foundation. So I love this, folks. We have a community here. We have so much great stuff happening with music. And it's really one of the things that can save us all, because music brings people together. Music it's a healer. I mean, we know this, and we're going to say goodnight to a gentleman who's been such a big part of providing the tools for musicians on every spot on this globe. He loves music from all around the world. He loves music from all through history, and he's put that back. His love for music, his love for creativity, and he's helped countless musicians to have really, really responsive and amazing tools, and we'll always thank him for that. And he's still making his own music, so check that out too at SoundCloud. Folks, thank you so much. Jack, thank you so much.
Thank you, Andre. It was fun, and it was a pleasure, and yeah, man, I want to see you face to face. I miss you, my brother.
We will be in person soon, Jack. Absolutely. Folks, subscribe, like this. We'll see you a week from this Friday with Dorit Chrysler. Jack, stay on. I'm going to jump off the stream now, and see you soon, folks. All right. Okay, cool. So we're off.